right. Fantastic introduction. It's another Wednesday. It's in March. Alongside me, my partner in crime, Chris Noble. I'm Mackenzie Wilson. We're coming to you live from Alberta with an actual Canada-wide theme show tonight, and hence on the occasion, I wore Team Canada. Chris, what happened? Did you not get the memo?
I didn't get the memo, Mac. You had this all figured out, and I was only running around scrambling today, so good for you.
No way.
So you don't keep me up to date on what's going on. So yeah, no, this is good. I'm excited about tonight because we're comparing provinces tonight, and I'll tell you, I was like inches away, and this would have been a really great ad. I wish I could have got it. Was bringing Quebec into this.
Oh, and yes.
Oh my God, had we known what they go through down there.
Yeah, could be. Well, you know what? I think this is going to be a great perspective tonight in the sense we got two landlords and possibly a third coming in mid show here if she can make it. We'll have, at least for sure, we got Saskatchewan and most notably Ontario. And I'm very excited for our Ontario guest. I had the complete pleasure of being on her show only a few weeks ago. She's our powerhouse equivalent with Ontario Landlord Watch, Kayla, and if I'm going to say your last name correctly, because I didn't actually catch the pronunciation, Andrade, if I'm saying that right. Nod? Yeah. Okay, we're doing good. And we got Andrew Tate over in Saskatchewan as well. Andrew's been in our show, probably our first 5 or 10 shows he came on, and with Saskatchewan. So we're going to have a really good conversation about these differences and the challenges. And I think, it can get really frustrating being down in the day-to-day grind of being a landlord, especially when a tenant's challenging you, pushing your buttons a bit when you're trying to, say, collect rent or maybe take care of damages. So let's have that kind of conversation going forward. Before we hop into it, let's make a few different announcements. I want to throw a few things out there, and I'm going to throw it back to Chris. Chris, do you have any announcements? Because we didn't really talk about this.
Yeah, I got a sad announcement. Like, as of right now, I just got a message from Andrew, and it says, "Shit, sorry, I have to cancel." He must have forgot he had to do something.
Oh,
so, I don't know what happened, but he had his Team Canada shirt on, and he's gone.
He's in the penalty box. Maybe he might be back in a bit, depending on what he's got to do. Probably kids are awake. I know he said he's putting kids down during this time. So no problem. We can definitely flex on the fly. But we've got some really great people helping us in the background for this community. I wanted just to give, again, a shout out and a thank you. Both the ladies that help us run the day-to-day function of the Facebook group, and yourself, Chris. That's Chris. That's Trish Fraser. And that is Gidra. And I apologize, I can't pronounce her last name, so I probably won't try. They are phenomenal. They help do our member approvals. They keep the conversation healthy on the page and really help us keep this culture that we have going. On another note, I am going to be a lot more organized in the future with these shows. I've got another lady that's joined us in the team. Her name is Magdalena. She is phenomenal, and she's just agreed to come on in a full-time capacity, which I'm very excited for. And she's the one that kind of helped me quarterback and organizing these shows going forward. And what that really means is me not creating these shows hours and days of the event the same day. I'm actually going to have these events planned out in our Mighty Networks event calendar, actually weeks out. And I'm hopefully to get like a 1 to 2 month lead time on this, where we actually have really good content planned well in advance for you folks. So stay tuned. We're getting better at this game, and thank you for working with our growing pains. We do appreciate it. Chris, what do you got going on your page?
Our page is good. We've had a lot more growth once again. We got some great people joining us, some great interaction and some exchanges. I'm really happy the way it's going. We did have one slight little problem with, again, the conduct of people and how they're treating each other, and we just don't tolerate it. This is we're going to treat this like a business, and where people are going to help each other out. We're going to give solid advice. If it's clear to me that there are people on here who are landlords by default or landlords just by a bad luck of the draw, and we call them also accidental landlords. So you know what? They're going to come and they're going to ask questions. That's the simplest way for it's by nature. You ask somebody. People don't seem to want to go out and dig and look things up. Sometimes they don't even know where to look something up.
So even the right terminology to use.
That's right. So when you see that, you need to have patience. And you know what? You want to give yourself credibility rather than being well, that person that has to give out that little jab in the comment. Quote a section. And you know what? Show your intelligence from a different direction and show that go and read this at section such and such of the Residential Tenancy Act or the Real Estate Board covers, quote it by showing a section and encourage that person to go and review it. I know I have just cut and paste the links right in for people to review it, and it's a little bit on them, and that reading will help them. So rather than putting a little dig in because somebody spelled something wrong or somebody they should know that. Well, you know what? There was one day when you didn't know it either. So
we all start from zero.
Yeah,
100%.
So let's work together to educate everybody. And you want to earn credibility on the page as an experienced landlord. I'll tell you, start quoting the section of your authority, and you will be instant credibility and a go-to resource. And that's what we're looking for here on this page.
Absolutely. And Christine, you say it best. Thanks for chiming in there. Everybody starts somewhere. Let's support them. And that's exactly the model we like to live by, and really the values that we have in this community. So without further ado, Kayla is politely waiting in the virtual stage there that we're chatting so nicely before the show here. And I am truly excited. First, she is a wealth of information, a landlord advocate for over 10 years. She brings a lot of experience and great perspective out from Ontario onto our Alberta Landlord Shop Talk show tonight. Kayla, welcome.
Hi. I was like, what happened to Andrew?
Yeah, he was in the back and beside you, and then now there's only 3 of us. So we'll probably grind his gears a bit throughout the show, but hopefully we can get him back if the timing works out. It was, to be truthful and to be fair to Andrew, we invited him like 45 minutes before the show, so it was very kind of him to hop on last minute, so he might be able to make it up for us. And same with the other gal, if she can make it out. She's out from BC. It'd be nice to have her as well, but again, it was a very last minute invite because Chris had a great idea. It's like, hey, why don't we bring on a few different provincial representations and have a very great comparison side by side on some of the most common problems we deal with as landlords.
Oh, I think it's just going to be the beginning of you guys bringing on other provinces as well as me. We're definitely getting into that because Ontario sucks right now. I was too jealous of Alberta.
You guys certainly have a challenging environment without a doubt. So let's get you warmed up. So Kayla, for the folks that don't know you over here in Alberta, give us a bit of a pitch of who you are and what you're all about.
So I've been a landlord since the age of 18. So I've been doing that now for about 18 years. We started off with, a young family. We were young, very young when we had our daughter, and we bought ourselves a semi, and that's how we started getting into the game. Then we moved ourselves up. So we got ourselves we sold a semi, got ourselves a 5-plex, and then moved ourselves into a triplex, then got ourselves a single family home. It's about that scaling, and I think everyone knows the struggle of trying to become investors. I became an advocate in 2010 when the city of Cambridge made landlords responsible for their tenants' delinquent utility bills. And I knew it was very unfair and unjust for the province or the municipality to force someone to pay for someone else's utility bill when it's someone else's debt. That's when I started getting very involved with the municipal politics and understanding how policies and bylaws are created, how they're implemented. That's when I knew that we needed power in numbers. So that's when I called every landlord on Kijiji, as many as I could, and said, listen, I need your help. This is what's happening. We need to get down to City Hall. We need to voice our concerns, and we need to get out for our protest. And we had a really good protest for the amount of time that we spent contacting landlords on Kijiji. It was beautiful to see how many people were able to support this movement, this grassroots movement. And from there, we knew we had to start fighting it at a provincial level, because after we were going back and forth with the municipal councillors, because it was easy money for them. So why would they want to go ahead and not implement such a policy when it was easy money for the city? So we started getting our petition ready for the province, and it started going to other municipalities that were dealing with the exact same water billing issue. And that came back not only with signatures regarding the water billing policy, because they wanted to support our community or it was happening in their community, it started coming with notes and letters to say, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. Can you fight the Residential and Tenancy Act and the Landlord and Tenant Board? And at that time, I was like, whoa, what is the RTA? What is the Landlord and Tenant Board? Hold on. And that's when we started saying, we need to bring all these people together. What way can we do this? And that we can all communicate together. And that's when we created a Facebook group so that all of our Ontario landlords, property managers, real estate agents can come together, work out these issues, and to talk about the solutions that is needed for the rental housing community, but mostly important, the housing industry in general.
And that's why I called you the powerhouse on your introduction, because you've taken so much action over this period of time. So that is awesome, Kayla. You raised a good point that we didn't really talk about on your show when I got to join you a few weeks back. But let's talk about how different provinces and probably more like local jurisdictions, the municipalities, handle utilities. So I'll give you a quick rundown of how things go here in Alberta. I would love to see your comparison over in Ontario. So utilities is a bit of a mixed bag here in Alberta because some of it's privatized, and that's mainly power and gas. So depending on where you live, you'll have different access to different providers. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong here, and people on the show too. If I'm saying something out of step, let me know because it does happen. And then the water, I think, is the same. Generally, it's provided by the municipality. So here in Calgary, we get billed through ENMAX, but it is provided by the city of Calgary. I know in Airdrie, for example, it's through Airdrie. And then depending on each business or depending on each municipality, there'll be different rules on who can have it. Does it have to be in the landlord's name or does it have to be in the tenant's name? So luckily here in Calgary, I can put everything in the tenant's name, including water. Whereas Airdrie is a small town north of Calgary, or city, I guess I should say. They have to have, I believe, just the water. Just the water has to be in the landlord's name. So, yeah. Chris, am I on step there? How about for you in Ponoka and where you're at with your rentals?
Actually, Ponoka just switched that up here a year and a half, 2 years ago. I'll be honest with you, it was kind of nice if it went into the tenant's name. But from a municipal business perspective, it's an excellent move on the municipality's part, because now myself as the landlord, I'm responsible to make sure that water bill's paid. So the city now is not going to be out any utility expense, or it's going to go onto your taxes. So smart move on their part. If I was a business person, I'd do the same thing. From a landlord perspective, it's hell for me, because now I have to worry about either collecting that or come up with a solution within my lease to deal with it. So for me, I offer a flat, because it's garbage, water, sewer, all that. It's a flat rate, $100. And so that's figured into my rent. And from there, any overage, I collect the difference from the tenant. If it's under, you know what? I don't
probably go up next year.
Well, no, I'm saying if they spend $95, then I just, that's to my advantage. It's $5 in my pocket. That's the way it works out. But when it goes over, they got to pay. But I also, from a real fair play perspective, I have some really good renters. And so what I do is I kind of run a tally where if they're $5 under 1 month or $10 under and they're $5 the next month, I don't even send them the bill, because it's leveling out. So for $5, I don't bill my tenant. It's not worth the extra time. And I find it a little bit, it's just me. It's not that it's wrong, but it's just me. I find it maybe a little bit petty, I guess, or whatever. So
nitpicking, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, well, there you go. Nitpicking. So from the municipality perspective, great strategy from a landlord's business. If they leave the water running, they would have had to pay it, but now I do. So yeah, you got to pay attention to your water bill. Fortunately, here's a neat thing. What center do you come from, Kayla, in Ontario?
Center?
Well, what city?
Oh, so I'm in Cambridge, Ontario. So we're in the Waterloo region.
Yeah, so you're a pretty big center there. So for me, being a small town of 6,500 people, I'll get a phone call. Hey, Chris, do you know you got a water bill that's up over $200? Oh, what? Okay, boom. That's small town, the benefits of small town. So you guys, Mac, Calgary, I think you got a place up in Edmonton, and you guys don't get that treatment. They see
get a bill.
You get a bill, and they see something, an overage that's in excess, that pops up somehow, and I'm getting a personal phone call saying you've got a $300 water bill coming down the pipe. You got a leak. So at least you can get over there within a day or two of the reading, and you can get it stopped. So you know what, there is some advantages to small town living, right? So
totally. And Kayla, what's that for your bowling game when you guys deal with utilities?
So it's going to be different in many different cities, but I will speak to the details of Cambridge just because that's where, that's where it all seemed to have transpired.
Yeah.
So right now we did have a deposit. We used to have a deposit that was in place of $400. They had another meeting. They took away that deposit from landlords. They had hired a consultant at $50,000 to tell them, where they think they should go with this policy. They obviously made sure that they put landlords on the hook for that type of water billing policy. And then they decided to tell landlords that they can introduce their own policy, their own water deposit in order to be able to recoup that type of cost if a tenant decides to leave the rental unit without paying their bill or leave the water taps running. And that's what our major concern was, is that sometimes it's a very hostile environment with your landlord and your tenant. And if the tenants are fully aware that any delinquent utility bill, they're not responsible for it, there's a good chance that they want to leave the taps running all the time and leave you with a nice huge water bill within the end of it. It's a great way for landlords to keep checking on their rental units to make sure that there's no type of leakage. So that kind of encourages more landlords to do that. But sometimes these leaks are so persistent and they come very fast for some reason in our city. We feel that our metering is out of whack. But there is an online system for landlords now to monitor their usage.
Okay.
So that's a good thing for us. So it's like we don't have that personalized phone call like Chris does, or we get in the bill. But it's still like, where do you go? And at that time when we had introduced this water billing, it actually turned out that even if the tenant didn't pay the water bill, it's not like you can take them to the landlord and tenant board to get them a judgment against them on that. The only thing we could do is say that it's interfering with landlords' reasonable rights, and that would cause for an eviction. So we really encourage our elected officials to take back this type of policy. One, because it's not good for the landlord and the investment area. And number two, it's that tenants are now getting evicted because they couldn't pay their water bill. So you make it look like the city's trying to, gain on that money for their water, for the delinquency of the water bill. But how much more money as taxpayers are paying when it comes down to housing now and paying for that shelter and emergency shelters because we're now kicking people out for their water bill.
Yeah, and I was going to go back on a point you said that was interesting, Kayla. And I've lost my train of thought. So
probably wasn't interesting. You're probably just saying that because you just lost it.
I did. I was just going to say that. That notification system you're talking about. I wanted to pick your brain on that. Can you set it up where if your usage breaks a threshold, maybe it's 10% over normal usage or 15 or 20, can you get an auto email, or is it something that you have to go in and check yourself?
Well, like I said, I am in Cambridge. We can't expect everything. But we do get a notification in the mail. They'll also send you the paper to say that your account is over that threshold. Because if it is over $200, that's when it does get transferred over to your property taxes.
Right.
That water bill now for the tenant gets put back to zero. So then, and they can start doing it again. So you got $200. It's maxed out. It's going to go over to your property taxes with a $50 fee. And then the initial account will go back to zero and the tenants can still use that again. And then it goes over to your property taxes again with another $50 fee. So it's it's kind of like a mean unlimited debit card almost.
Nice. Did we lose Mac? He froze up, did he? Yeah, it looks like he is.
Yeah.
There he's back. Now he's back.
I'm back now. Yeah. Gotta tell my kids to turn down the YouTube kids. I think they're on it right now. But and I remember the other point I wanted to bring up with you, Kayla. So you said you could not evict for non-payment of utilities. That's not an option in Ontario.
No, initially it was an N5 notice. So it's more like interfering with the landlord's reasonable rights. That was
Okay.
the loophole that we were working on, because the landlord and tenant board would never discuss any type of application that was related to water unless it was included, or any utility for that matter, unless it was included within the lawful rent. Now with our changes with Bill 184, they now are working that concept where landlords can indeed bring utility applications to the landlord and tenant board, but we're kind of in Ontario, we're like, whoa, wait. We have a lot of backlog right now with non-payment of rent. Are we really ready to be taking on applications for utilities? I think we really should, not get the cart before the horse on its way. So there's lots of changes that are happening that I don't even know if they're going to be fully capable of dealing with that. Because if you have a situation where you're having that tenant responsible for a 60-40 split of utilities, but if the landlord did not fix something in that unit that caused that type of water or hydro usage, now the tenants are going to bring that type of claim to the landlord and tenant board in order to try to get themselves off the hook from paying for that utility.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong here, but in Alberta, we could evict on the reason of non-payment of utilities.
Well, yeah, because what it is just simply a breach of your contract, right? It's breach of your lease. So it's a substantial breach. As a matter of fact, let's do that. Let's talk that. There's a girl here that asked me for some assistance. She has a place over in Bashaw, and they are slow at paying the rent. They're always late. They are always late on paying the utilities, and they are behind in the utilities. So what she does when she gets the utility bill, the deal is, okay, the utilities are still in her name. Boom, she sends them the bill, and they're supposed to pay it right away. I said to her, well, why didn't you have them put the utilities in her name? Again, a new landlord by default. She goes, well, I didn't think of that. I said, okay, well, let's talk about the benefits of doing that. So we did, and she goes, okay, going forward, she probably will be doing that. Might as well let the utility companies deal with the collections rather than us, right? Makes sense. So now she's sending out a 14-day eviction, and it goes like this: for substantial breach, 1, unpaid utilities; 2, continually late payment of utilities; and 3, continually late payment of rent. I said, do you want them anymore? She says, no, I'm tired of them. I want them gone. And I said, okay. So now she's got 3 reasons. So even if they pay the utilities up in full now, she still has 2 more reasons to evict them, because she now has the history of being late. So she can take them to task on that and have them evicted and pursue the RTDRS if she has to.
So, and I think that's a great segue. So I'm going to throw us back to Kayla Sire. So we're talking about utilities and unpaid utilities. And then Chris just went to an example where we started the eviction process here in Alberta, and he labeled 1, 2, 3, or 4 reasons or more. You can do as many reasons as you want that are breaches of your lease, all in one eviction process in one documentation or one form. Now, I know when we talked last, Kayla, that's quite a bit different for you. How does it work in Ontario?
So if we got utilities in the mix and we have rent in the mix, so we'll have 2 different type of forms because we love killing trees here. So we barely have anything left because we're printing off our documents and our standard lease. Don't get me started. So as of right now with your N4 application, so let's say that they didn't pay on the 1st, then on the 2nd of the month, you're going to give an N4 notice. So that gives the tenant 14 days to come up with that money to pay. If they don't, that's when a landlord can then pay $186 up to $201, depending on which way you file. Then you're going to be paying for an application to the landlord and tenant board. Then you're going to have to sit and wait until the landlord and tenant board wants to inform you of when your hearing is, so that you can discuss your non-payment of rent. But now we got a utility mixture in there. So now we got an N5. That's gonna be the details of waiting 7 days. So you're gonna give them an N5 notice stating that you didn't pay your water bill. Then you're gonna wait 7 days to see if they pay that water bill, and they have 20 days to vacate the property on that type of notice, but they never do. And then you're gonna file that at the board. And now you probably have 2 different applications going on here, and the the chances of an adjudicator sitting down to discuss both of them with you, that might happen, but they might talk about the N4, the non-payment of rent first, and then you'll have another hearing date to talk about the N5, so the non-payment of utility.
And when you throw damages in the mix, is that another N something form?
That will be a part of including it on the N5 form, but in order to address it and to have it shown that you've given it twice in 60 days or within 6 months, you actually have to have it for that in particular issue. So if you have water billing, you got to make sure that water billing is put on there and it was for twice. So you can't just say, oh, I gave you one and I gave it for you for water bill and I'm also giving it to you for damages. You actually have to give it the form to them twice based on that one in particular issue.
That sounds painful.
You really need like a university degree / like paralegal to understand the way to deal with just simple common sense issues. And that's what I like about other provinces is that they don't get legal reps involved very often. It's the landlord and it's the tenant, right? And that's where I think it should be to not make it so complicated. But
do you both know, like with my legal backgrounds that I've had in policing, do you know this whole process is a very simple process just to modify it through their their legislative abilities and just streamline this? But everybody's got their little empires and their little ways and their little struggles and their little worlds they got to protect. And this can be so easily modified and just streamlined instead of having 15 forms to fill out because of one thing, where we just go throw it all in the mix, go in and sort it out, and you're either going to pay it or you're going to get kicked out or both. So.
Oh, Chris, if you miss your N4 by 1 day, they're throwing your application out and you have to start it all over again. You have to give the 14 days notice. You have to wait for the new hearing. They have a way that if you spelt the tenant's name wrong by some spelling, if you didn't add 2 of the landlords on that application, if you don't amend it and the tenant doesn't agree to amend it, they can throw that out. Like the minor errors that are being thrown out and then having a landlord start all over again. That's what's really irritating this community in Ontario, because it's unfair and it could easily be amended and discussed at your hearing. But it's I think we're feeding the piggy bank a little bit too much, because every time you do an error, we have to keep giving them $186.
Yeah, the error process here is you make an application for an amendment in court, and certainly the person has a right to dispute it, saying but they have to have a really good reason why they're disputing that that error that's on there. And 9.9999 times out of 10, they don't win, because okay, well, it's up front for you. You can even go as far as, look, I told them ahead of time that I'm going to ask for this application for this amendment. And they said, were you told this? Yeah. You had time to prepare for it? Yeah. And what's your reason? Well, I think it should be thrown out. Well, why? Because it wasn't right. Okay, sorry. You were told it's going to be amended. Carry on. Next issue. It's that simple. And when I used to do the policing, I make a mistake on a ticket or something that I had written. The guy would try to say that, hey, my name is spelled wrong, but the judge says, okay, but is this you? And yeah, okay, so we'll amend it. So move on. What's the problem here? So we'll switch the I and the E over,
So let's go into another question here. So talking about amendments and stuff. So obviously Kayla laid out that if it's not perfect and there's an error in any degree, restart the whole process is basically what I heard. Did I hear that correctly? Gross. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So Chris, and she had asked me this when I was on her show, and I wanted to make sure I've gotten this correct. If we're in court, and for example, I had a lease in one of my situations where I ended it in the same year it started. So essentially the lease was only, well, actually, technically, the lease was 0 days, because I had said, basically, if I remember correctly, it was first day of April 2020. And then it should have been last day of March 2021, but in fact I put 2020. So it was like, it's like a 24-hour lease, which obviously wasn't the case, because it's 12 consecutive months is a 1-year term. But if I had gone to court and the tenant at that time, once I'd gone to court, say they'd been renting for 4 or 5 months and we had a problem and then we ended up in court, my lease wouldn't probably get thrown out, because they've been paying rent the entire time. and all of a sudden, in the final hour, they're saying, "Oh, by the way, you got your term wrong. This is an invalid lease," but they've been paying for 5 months. What would probably happen in the court for me?
Very simple. Where you would say, okay, the great thing about this is everybody's there to be questioned. You in a court of law where you're there for a charge against you, you don't have to take a stand and give evidence against yourself. In this case, because it's civil, the mere fact that you're both sitting there, you can pose the question right to them. When you rented from me, what was the term that we agreed to? Well, I was going to rent from you for a year. No further questions.
Yeah.
Done. Like he just sewered himself. So yeah, you were already told him that is this a typo? Absolutely. Typos happen. They happen everywhere. They happen with the RTDRS. We even had one the other day when we were helping a lady evict somebody. But at the end of the day, it wasn't crucial to the outcome, and they wouldn't fix it. They said, no, we understand what's going on here. Everybody knew it was in the hearing. It's all spoken to. It's a typo. Yeah. So in Alberta, Kayla, we can go in with a simple explanation and do an amendment if it's detrimental to the outcome of the case or brings the whole system into some disrepute. Then certainly would be revisited at that point, whether it's good or not. So simple errors can be handled
right now, and we're sending it to the landlord and tenant board. Just giving them some pointers. Keep it going, guys.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So and Don mentioned there. Don's one of our eviction specialists. He's with Edmonton Eviction Services up in Edmonton. Hey, Don, thanks for tuning in as always. He's a wealth of knowledge as well, and he's been on our show too. And yeah, it just what you say, Kayla, is totally mind-boggling. Some of the stuff that you guys are dealing with, which is challenging, because when you guys look economically at your guys' environment, when you think of Canada, you think of immigration into Canada, there's only typical two places people think of Canada. It's typically Toronto or Vancouver, and they forget everything else in the middle. Like, that's not Canada. That's just two places. So you guys get that great influx of immigration, which is a good demand increase for you guys. You guys are rocking right now. Well, you know what? I shouldn't say if you're rocking right now. I know previously over the last few years, you guys have been doing really well economically. So you guys have seen great appreciation in your real estate, which is totally enticing for us investors when we're looking to invest our money for our rental properties. But then, you discuss some of these landlording challenges that you guys have and the legislation to deal with. And you're like, kind of make you take a second guess. So from our show that we talked 2 weeks ago, what was your biggest takeaway from the conversation? And let's dive into that point for our viewers with you.
Minus the concept of rent control and your leases, where you guys want fixed term leases versus month-to-month leases. And we are a month-to-month lease kind of province versus a 1 year, because it really doesn't make any sense. It only makes sense when it comes down to the landlord and tenant board. When you want to take over the unit for your own personal use, you have to wait for that year contract to end. If you want to show, they're late on their payments, you can't serve a certain application to the tenant until their time frame of their lease has ended.
What do you mean? Let's take a step back there. If you've got a term lease and they're in breach, let's say not paying rent or utilities, or there's damages at play, you can't serve them until the end of the lease. Did I hear that right?
Yeah. So month to month, if you have a tenant who's month to month and they're paying late all the time, you got to have five consecutive N4 notices, so non-payment of rent notices, and that's if you're lucky. Sometimes you get an adjudicator that wants to see more than 5. But you got to have 5 notices of non-payment of rent before they would consider it as an eviction. But again, what they usually do at that court hearing is that if you're taking to someone to court for being persistently late, they will now put them on a payment plan. So they have a Section 78. I believe that's the section. I'm not a paralegal. And then you're going to be able to say with the Section 78, if the tenant is in breach, so if they are late a penny or a day late, then the landlord can apply to the board to evict the tenant without their knowledge. And that sometimes it does happen. The tenant does default. They don't make their agreement. The landlord will apply to the board to evict that tenant. But then the tenant will tell the board, I need a stay. and that stay gives them a hold on the eviction. And now there's another date that needs to be scheduled for the landlord and the tenant to go back to the landlord and tenant board to explain why the tenant feels that the eviction should not proceed.
Wow.
So here, you know, one part is if you do have a tenant who's late, not to make it sound too simple here, but you do need a little bit of a history of giving 14-day notices for eviction. Just, you know, being a couple days late and now you want to evict them, you know what, you're never going to get it. No. And as if I was a tenant, I wouldn't leave either. So with that said, a history of that, and Bill Biko has preached that the educated landlord is who what he promotes in his stuff, and that is important to know that you got to have that history to take to them. But then you could still end up on a payment plan. However, you could get a conditional order that if they are late again and they are doing this, then the order can stand that if you don't make your payment by this date, then the landlord can come and or can seek the eviction, and it's conditional. So you kind of have it hanging over their head. So it's kind of nice that way.
So, but yeah, let me add on that too, Chris. So just thinking out loud here, Kayla. So you mentioned you need to have a lot of these consecutive N5s. So what happens if you're in Ontario and you've had rent late 3 or 4 months and you're like, you know, enough's enough, and you file your first late rent notice at N5? Can you count those previous months they were late as well, or do you have to have 5 N5 filings to start to kind of really justify that late payment eviction?
Yeah, they really want the N4, the non-payment of rent. They want to see at least 5 throughout that 12-month period. So it's almost, they look at a 12-month period for how many times that they have been late. Yeah. And when you file it at the board, and once you get to the board, they look at it and say, okay, you've been late 5 times. And if the tenant shows up, they'll be like, listen, this is what happened. I just couldn't make my payments. They'll say, okay, let's work out that you're going to be on time now every single month going forward. And if you're not, then the landlord can apply to evict you. But from our knowledge from different landlords, because I haven't experienced it myself, when you are on a yearly lease, you actually have to wait until that yearly lease goes month to month before you can give them the N8 application. So for the persistency of being late.
Wow. Okay. And I'm going to add on that. And Chris, if you can keep a question in the background here. So yes, I mean, like Chris said, there has to be a history to warrant the eviction on what you're trying to evict for, you know, damages, late rent, so whatever it might be. But we don't need to file paperwork. If there's been great communication that's been documented through text and email and other forms of communication, you have that organized nicely. You could do one filing at month 5 and say, you know what, I've had this tenant for 5 months. They've been late every month. You can skip your 14-day notice, and you can go straight to the eviction process and just file with the RTRDS. We don't need to do. You could just do one piece of paperwork, and you can file for an immediate eviction if it warrants what you're asking for, which is kind of interesting because we do have a 14-day notice, but you don't have to use that tool. You can go straight to eviction and not use the 14-day notice if you don't want to, which I think is something different as well for you guys.
Yeah, we have to. And you know what? It's not even to the point where, you know, we have tenants who are down on their luck and they're struggling, and we have many landlords out there being very supportive. This is ones that are abusing the system, and once they finally get through, you know, trying to kick out your application so that you have to restart again, or say that you served it the wrong way. You put it underneath my door. You didn't put it in my mailbox. Like, that could cause the application to get thrown out at the landlord and tenant board, where the landlord has to reserve the document, even though they know that this hearing is happening. They know they haven't paid rent. It's just techniques and tactics that these tenants and their legal representation uses to do it. And for us, like an N4 notice from, you know, many landlords, we give our N4 notice. We put if it's 2 tenants on the lease, we put the 2 tenants' names on that non-payment of rent form. Once that form goes to the tenants, we file it with the landlord and tenant board. We're hearing now through the grapevines of all these landlords and these adjudicators, they want you to issue an N4 notice for both tenants on the lease, but you got to send it individually. So if there's 2 people, you got to give the same form to both of them. And this is just little stuff that, is being picked up by these adjudicators at the Landlord and Tenant Board. And they just hired a whole bunch, like 34 last year, and they hired 5 for this year. And now these adjudicators are growing. They're going through the growing pains. They're making mistakes, and that's causing landlord applications to be thrown out, and the landlords having to reply back again. But I have faith in the chair. Karen, she's great. You can see that she's trying to make some changes, but we do have the Ontario Ombudsman actively investigating our social justice tribunal because of the delays and because they're not giving all parties access to justice.
So let's pivot. Oh, Chris, I've been kind of running the conversation. Do you got anything you want to throw in this?
Yeah, let's. I want to ask about. The whole COVID mess.
Oh, I was just going to go there. So you take it back. Yep.
I beat you. So just to give you, I know you and Mac talked about this on your show, but just for everybody, of course, we went through the. You can't evict anybody for a certain period of time, and then the CERBs, the payments, and they came out, and people were supposed to be using that to pay their rent and get caught up, but of course it went to other reasons, and then sorry, I don't have any money. Would you get a CERB? Yeah, but I used it. Okay, so I will give our MLA Nate. I can't get his last. Just slips my mind right now, but he said no. Here's the line. Here's drawn in the sand. After this date, you can go for evictions. So what that created was some people to go, oh crap. I better be careful how I play this. However, you guys, are you not still under a no eviction thing right now?
So Toronto, we got a message from the Social Justice Tribunal saying that with the state of emergency, it's been lifted. But now people are saying that there was a press conference where Doug Ford stated that Toronto is still not issuing evictions. So we're still in the midst of trying to figure out if the evictions are happening, because when they first did the first eviction ban, it was done through the courts and the Supreme Court. And now the next time around, they kind of just put it in legislation. Like, okay, I'm just going to write this in now for the second time. But so the Peel in the Toronto region can still potentially be in there.
Wow.
But right now it's waves. Like we went through 2 different ones, 2 different eviction bans, and now we actually have a rent freeze as well.
So are you kind of in a point now where you could have had people for this past year living rent free because they didn't get evicted?
That we just recently had a member tag me in a post, 15 months non-payment of rent, and they finally got the sheriff at their door. And then my brother-in-law, he just had his tenant 8 months, and that's him filing right away, dealing with the court systems. Like we're going a long time. And what's really damaging is that it's these landlords who own single family homes, the condos, townhouses, where, they really, if the tenants are not paying, they are the ones who have to come up with that type of income to keep the property going and not default. Because a lot of people thought, oh, well, there's a mortgage defer. You're able to defer your mortgage, not knowing that there is complications to deferring your mortgage, and it could hinder your borrowing power for the future by trying to do that.
Yeah,
and you pay for it no matter what. Yeah, you can defer, but you're still paying for it with interest at the end of your term.
Yeah, we had people thinking that here too. Well, you can defer your mortgage. Well, we can defer our payment. That's not the way it works. They don't realize if you take that last payment and stick it on the end of your 22 years that are left in your mortgage, do the math on that. You never catch that back up.
No. And that's the part where we're trying to say, like, if you look at for us in Ontario, like we can't even charge a late fee. So if our tenants are late, that's it. We're paying the late fee ourselves if we don't pay our bills on time. But it's definitely an unfair system, and they don't get it. They go, well, why are the rents so high? Why is it a supply and demand issue? Where's our supply? How come we don't have developers wanting to build? Why don't we have home secondary suites wanting to be created? It's like, well, you're choking out your investors. Unless the government wants to step up and they want to continue to use taxpayers' dollars to build, manage, maintain, and subsidize. And that's like winning a lottery if you get accepted into government housing down here. So they have a lot of fixing to do, not only with the Residential and Tenancy Act and Landlord and Tenant Board, but they really need to look at the way that they manage their own government housing and how that works, and change it where it could coexist and clash nicely with the private industry.
If you, I I think maybe you're probably interested in kind of investing out here now, given the economy the way it is out here with our oil and gas the way it's been. I think there's probably some good buys out here.
There's great buying opportunity. I'll take two takeaways here. Let's tackle Neil's question. He's got a question for you, Kayla. Kayla, do you have to pay the fee for each N4 application, and you need 4 or 5 to get an eviction? That would add up quickly. Is that the right interpretation on these N filings?
So we start off with an N form, and it usually ends with an L form. So the N forms are always free because they want you just to kind of, it's almost like that warning, because sometimes the tenants listen to that form and they don't have to proceed anything further. Then you get into your L1s, your L2s, your L3s, your L4, and they're working on an L10 right now. So they like the alphabet around here, and again, killing trees. But luckily, we're glad we don't have to pay for the N4 side of things. But if you look at it, sometimes these landlords are paying for registered mail in order to send this N4, especially if they don't have door-to-door mailboxes, and they want to make sure that the tenants are signing that they have received it, because our tenants do use it as an excuse that they never received their N4 application, and that's why the hearing may get adjourned and postponed for another day.
Wow, good to know. And then the other point we're kind of talking about there about some of the provincial differences. At least I know the last time I checked, like we'll take say Toronto area, and I know Vancouver as well. For you guys to make an investment actually work, they're like, $800,000 to $1.5 million like basic single family homes. To make that work as an investment doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at the return on it, because your return is going to be like just dismal. Whereas right now here in Calgary, actually probably across the whole province, and Edmonton, Red Deer, all of our smaller cities, anywhere in the province really, you can probably get into a property anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 that would cash flow $300 to $500 a month, and you can probably look like, if you run your numbers right, you can look at a return anywhere of, let's say, 8 to 9% on the low side, and you should be up in the high teens, maybe in the low 20s. Whereas I don't think that's quite an option for you guys right now in your centers. No, hey.
No, even from my little city, like we're 45 minutes away. Like, I can't even say tiny. I had 130,000 people. That's what they say on the sign. I don't think they ever update it.
Yeah.
But if we have 130,000 here in Cambridge, and we're seeing our prices go through the roof from a semi at 501,000 listed, and then going for 801,000 in Kitchener, which is literally 20-30 minutes away from us, and we're seeing the exact same prices here coming in Cambridge. So we're like, hello, can you guys not see what's happening? The landlords are getting fed up. They're saying it's a good market, it's a hot market, let's sell this single family home, let's sell this condo, let's cash out now while the money's good. And now they've taken a rental unit off of the market, and for the price of housing of what it's actually getting sold for, that property will never see the light of day of the rental market again. What would the rental income be for where the landlord wants to make money, cover the maintenance, the taxes, the insurance? It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work whatsoever.
Totally. And one thing I'm going to riff before we take this question that Chris popped up on the screen here is basic economics or business is you want there has to be two willing parties that want to exchange a product or a service for a transaction to take place. But like you said, your guys' environment is so detrimental to landlords with the legislation, the laws that you have in effect. No one wants to take the risk of becoming a landlord. So you really are killing that supply. And yet your demand's not going anywhere. In fact, it's still increasing with immigration and the jobs and the growth that you guys are having. And it's just perpetually making a situation worse and worse and worse, which is unfortunate, because you guys do have really good. We would have good rental markets if the legislation was definitely more favorable. So, do you want to take this question, Chris, since you threw it up on the page? What is a flop house? I should know this, but I don't even know what that is.
Mackenzie, before you jump onto the question there, you also have, I was just listening to the city of Cambridge when they were doing minor variance committees of trying to approve secondary suites. And so the community can actually jump on to these, what's now live. They can join into this YouTube channel, and you're able to voice your concerns and call in and talk to the committee of why you don't feel that their application should be approved. So many tenants or many neighbors will come on and say, yeah, I don't want the secondary suite. Parking's already an issue. I don't want to be living next to a rental unit. And because of that, And if it's just parking in itself, the committee will actually not approve this application from being built. So we have still crazy people out there wanting to create secondary suites, but you can't get it approved just because of municipal policies or because your neighbors are upset with you. And they talk about parking, but it's like, maybe it's about asking that we want to rent it to not somebody with a car, but somebody without a car. And that would also fit the need of the community, because we already have a housing crisis and we have a homeless crisis at the same time, but they don't quite click everything together to see how that works.
You got people wanting to provide affordable housing, but they're simply not allowed, which is just asinine when you're trying to, these are the biggest public problems that the governments are dealing with. Yeah, they're buying themselves in their own hand and they're not approving it. So yeah, I definitely recognize, and I'll quickly give you an Alberta perspective on what you just mentioned, Kayla. So you're muting me. Thanks, Chris. You got yourself muted now.
No. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to figure out where that feedback's coming from, and I
think it's you.
Well, I've been muted this whole time.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. So I'll just kind of quickly segue on that. So I'll go from Calgary and Edmonton, our two biggest cities. Edmonton, I'm a Calgary boy, so there's always this rivalry going on, but they've actually gotten this right, and they've done right from the while. So for a very long time, they've legalized, blanketed across the entire city, secondary suites. They have a very standard process, and if you meet mostly health and safety and building code requirements and some lot requirements, meaning your property has to be this size and this many parking spots available, you get approved. No questions asked. Doesn't matter what your neighbor thinks, whatever. Calgary was, up to a few years ago, exactly what you just said, Kayla. I could go and get my application for the city. I would have to do a bunch of renovations to make it legal. They actually have temporarily relaxed those because we have probably, and I'm talking 2000, let's say in around 2016 stats, where they had estimated that there's 16 to 18,000 unregistered illegal suites in the city of Calgary, and they had maybe a 2 to 3%, or like, oh no, they only had 500 in and around there actually registered with the city as legal suites. So we had this big issue going on. So and I'm trying to keep my politics aside. Not a fan of Nenshi, but he is our mayor. But he has done something really, really well, where he was pushing when in his first term in office to legalize secondary suites blanketed across the city. So we've actually somewhat have gotten there now, where depending on what your zoning designation on your property, if you're RC1, that would, because RC2 would be you'd be allowed to have 2 legal suites on one lot or one property. But now we've actually pushed that to most single family homes that fit the RC1 designation, which is a great. But there's still a lot of requirements you have to meet. Same thing about parking availability and some other site requirements. So there's still some hoops to jump through, but we've definitely got to that place where if you meet the basic requirements, they're more or less just approving you now. But we used to be the exact same thing. Neighbor Joe says, no, I don't like your 3 cars parked out there. I'm complaining. I don't like the way your fence looks. I'm not going to let you, I'm going to fight your application for your secondary suite, which is funny as that, I know I'm totally rambling here, but this bugs me a lot, is parking is like the worst excuse possible, because there's actually, statistically, they've looked at, they've done the studies. There's people who own 7 or 8 cars in their single family house. And then there could be, you could have 2 renters in your basement, and they're both students that commute to the bus to school. And there's no, anyways, my rant is done.
You feel better now, bud?
Yeah. Better. Go Canada, go.
It makes sense. It makes sense. It's got to have that common sense factor to it. But they look at the overall, the square footage of the lot and the design of it, and it's gone too crazy and not in a very investor friendly atmosphere, where why would anyone want to go through that rigmarole just to try to get a secondary suite? And sometimes you're going to get more applications like this, because you know why? Because we already see houses going for high dollar. They want to live in it, but they also can't afford to pay that type of price if they are. So they're going to need that secondary income. Or you have your seniors, people who it doesn't make sense for them to downsize anymore. So let's utilize that and try to get them to create secondary suites. But when they look at the Residential Intensity Act and the Landlord and Tenant Board in Ontario, why would you want to do it? So we're willing to work with you. We want to work on these programs, but right now we need a lot of fixing at the provincial level in order to try to work together as a dynamite team that we can be to address these housing concerns.
We are coming. I just looked down. I just realized, like, where did this hour go? So let's go to Dan's question here for Kayla about the flop houses before we run out of time. So Kayla, can you read that there?
Yeah. Kayla, what's the flop house rentals? I never heard of a flop house.
Yeah, what is a flop house? Let's define that first, because I don't even know what that is.
It may be a flip. We call them flip houses. So it's more of the run down houses that we're trying to renovate and get them back up on the market, try to make some money off of it.
He explains in the question. He says you're renting a house out by the room.
Oh, so a rooming house. So we call it like a rooming house. Do you see how awesome it is just to get the different terminology that we all use?
Yeah.
Not very common. I don't think a lot of people get into renting out by the rooms. The only time you'll get renting out to the rooms is more for student rentals. Student rentals are really big in the cities where universities are and colleges and things like that. But yeah, I really feel that rooming houses is definitely a part of the solution that is needed to address the housing concern, because that there's got to be a stepping stool. It's got to be a partnership. It's got to be people who are, living in the shelters or in emergency shelters right now, getting them to team up nicely with friends that they know, or even people that they can work together with, and they rent a whole place together. And, based on how that living arrangement works and how everybody's working together, you kind of escalate. Now you're on a different list to have your own individual 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom unit. But it makes a lot more sense to do it that way than having people inside of a shelter that they can only stay in there for certain hours of the day, and then they have to leave for the remainder until they can come back in the evening hour to sleep.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I want to add that last part of the question there. So for us, rooming houses, and I need Bill Beacle for this to make sure I'm not quoting this incorrectly, but if you live in the house and you're renting out other rooms in the house, it falls under the Innkeepers Act, which is the same act that hotels fall under, deal with eviction. So basically, if someone's being silly, call the cops, they're gone. Basically, no questions asked. It's very favorable in terms of the host. Do you guys have the same thing when you rent out by the room? Does it fall under your Residential Tenancy Act, or do you know if it falls under a different set of legislation?
All of our rooms, unless the landlord lives in the home, that's when it still goes underneath the RTA. So that's where it's good in a way. If you're renting out your rooms and you live there, then you don't want them there anymore. You give them the boot. You don't want to share this video now because it might give them some ideas with your Innkeeper Act. But a lot of us go with the short-term rentals. So a lot of if it's under 28 days, it's now considered short-term. And that's for people, working in the city and they just want to rent it for a little bit. They're waiting for their house to be built, so they go in a short-term matter. But short-terms have been able to take a different. Right before COVID, they were very, very on the up because you didn't have to follow the Residential Tenancy Act when it came to the short-term rentals. So that's why they became really big. But now with COVID, a lot of people have now transitioned back into their long-term rentals, or they actually have it sitting empty. And because it's sitting empty, many municipalities are trying to introduce a vacant tax, property tax, to prevent people from leaving their rental units empty. And
we don't have that right now.
Well, I think, Mac, going forward, we have to have a Canada-wide where Kayla's got a bunch of contacts down in the East Coast. I can certainly find something in Quebec, being originally from there. We've got our BC connections. Quebec? You knew that.
You're still different though.
Here, I'm bilingual. Ready? Poutine.
Can you tell me how you make that frozen syrup and it tastes so very good? Or how did you do that last time?
I can bring some down to your house and I'll do that for you. So.
Oh, okay. Well, we don't off here then. All right, inside joke. Let's continue on. We're wrapping up should we wrap up the show? I mean, Kayla, is there any other things? I know when we've had this conversation, what else you want to kind of jump at for the differences, or just any general comments before we kind of close up the show?
I think it's really important even for as friendly as you guys are with being very landlord friendly. I still think it's very important for your landlord community to be very involved in what's being happening politically and advocate and come together and not only help each other out with that day-to-day operation questions that you guys do so well, but making sure that you're always staying on top of different policies and procedures of your in particular province or other provinces. just because Ontario seems to follow BC a lot, where we like to copycat people. We can't think on it by ourselves. So we like to copycat people. So be prepared that you never know what your elected officials see in our neck of the woods. And they might implement something like that for you. So always be very prepared to advocate and to come together united, and making sure that all of you landlords now understand, like me and Mackenzie talked about, Landlord Credit Bureau. So when we're dealing with non-payment rent and we're dealing with our utilities, this is something where I feel that Landlord Credit Bureau now is the bread and butter for what we need in order to protect ourselves and to give us justice. Because right now for our landlord and tenant board, it's not giving justice where justice is due.
Yeah. Okay. Two things. We're going to do a little overtime, just a tad bit there, Chris. Yes. Good. You smiled. So we didn't even touch increase in rent. How do you deal with that, Kayla? I want to get that question out there.
So in Ontario, we are capped. So we're capped at 2.5%. Now, a lot of people think, oh, well, you can only do 2.5% a year. No, they still tell us how much rent we can increase every single year. So we had it at 1.5%, then it went to 1.8%. And then we're like, given us a 2.2%, which was our latest one. And we were so excited. And we're like, oh my God, is it going to go to 2.5? And now the government has told us that we are not able to do an increase for 2021. So many landlords decided not to increase the rent for 2020 because of them being very generous. And now we are not able to do a rent increase for 2021. So now as of January, hopefully January 2022, it's going to be considered rent increase day across Ontario.
Wow. Good to know. Yeah. I mean, our note, and I'll be quick on this, is we're dictated by the market. We can charge whatever we want, but if the tenant's not planning a rental, you're going to be vacant. And what doesn't get mentioned as much in the media, and I mentioned this on your show as well, Kayla, is our rent will go down when there's no demand. So we had a big oil recession that we've been dealing with since about 2015, 2016. Rents here in Calgary, I can speak for this area, did drop by 5, 10, 15, and in some cases it went up to 20, 25%. So people took some very big cuts on their rent because we had a big mass exodus out of the province. As when job people got laid off, they went back to Ontario, the East Coast, wherever they came from. And so rents did definitely self-correct. So that doesn't really get mentioned too much in the news or the media. But at the same time, as well, we don't have a rent control. Our only restriction is if it's on a term lease, or actually it doesn't matter if it's term or month to month, you can only raise rent once every 365 calendar days. So
that's the thing here too. Like even with our cap of 2.5%, you can only increase it to that 2.5. You can indeed apply to the landlord and tenant board to raise the rent above the guidelines, and the maximum is 3% of whatever the rate is that year. But what are the chances of you having your application heard? How long it actually is going to be? It's going to take you, and it is a fee of $200 just to even apply to have that application looked at. And again, that's a time frame where they run out. They will say that, okay, it's going to be this percentage for this long for this year, and then it's supposed to go back. So there's a lot of complication, and it shouldn't be. I think I tell them every time, it's real estate is a business. The numbers need to work, and if we have no control in what our taxes, our insurance, and our utilities are, and our maintenance, how do you expect landlords to be respectful and not trying to go through the loopholes of evicting people to get the rent up? And that's what we're seeing now is where landlords are looking for ways to even want to move into their own rental unit for a year, just so that they can reposition it with what the current market can hold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
I think next time
now, aren't you? We're coming. I want those listings, Mackenzie and Chris. Can you let me know what I'm looking at for some buildings up there? That'd be great.
I have an apartment building just down the street with 21 units in it for sale. So not particularly mine, but I know where it is. So if you're in, let me know.
I'm gonna message you, but I bet you someone on my feed right now is gonna see it and be messaging you before I even get to do it.
Yeah, well, it's full and it's available. I know it because I work for the people, and they're wanting to unload it. So if you're looking, there's an apartment right here in this cute little town where you'll get notified of your water overage.
Yeah, there you go.
Chris, I'm gonna be messaging you, buddy, and I need a property manager lined up too.
There you go.
Done.
Love it. Well, let's wrap it up on that note. And we're so good at housekeeping. I'm doing more right now because I just remembered it. If you guys are new to the channel, we're adding new members every week. Thank you for taking the time to join our community. We are thrilled to have you. You can follow all of our content best on Facebook over at Find Great Tenants with an S.com, as well as we're moving our kind of conversation slowly from Facebook over to Mighty Networks, which is essentially like a private online Facebook for just our community. And the reason we're doing that because as much as we love Facebook because it has connected us, it's not the most conducive place for a learning environment. Plus, it has its own pitfalls. And even in Australia, like you mentioned a few weeks back, Chris, they actually shut down part of Facebook in Australia through legislation that was pushed through by the Australian government. So we don't want to lose you guys if something goes wrong tomorrow. We don't have access to the group. So folks, if you haven't already, take some time, come over to Mighty Networks. You can log in with your Facebook account or create your own account. It's super easy. Has all the same features, newsfeed and posting and comments, all the same. So
the only other little piece of housekeeping we'll deal with here is that it's been said here and there off and on and referred to as we have a list. Well, we don't have a list. However, what we do have is a lady on our page who keeps track of what's going on, and what she will do is make the connection between someone you want to know about and someone they rented from, and they will she'll make it so that you guys can connect with each other for reference purposes. So
we have a landlord reference list.
A Ramford, yeah, exactly what we're calling a landlord reference list, and you can contact Trish on our page, and she'll say you can find out about people good or bad on the from the page and check that out. So lists are not kosher in the big world there. So let's do what it truly is a reference list, and we can get that information out to you through these checks. You just check with Trish on our page.
Perfect.
There we go.
Great. Let's wrap it up. That's a wrap. Kayla, thank you so much for doing overtime with us. I know it's 10 after 10 your time, so thank you so much for spending your time with us tonight. We greatly appreciate it.
No, thank you for inviting me. I loved it, and I can't wait to have you on our channel again, so that we can keep this going. Because this is only the tip of the iceberg, I think, in what's to come for all of our communities. And as long as we're building our landlords communities and making them stronger right across Canada now, and this is great.
Absolutely awesome.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.